What if I told you that the deepest hole in the lake is probably the worst place you could choose to look for winter bream? It sounds crazy, I know. It goes against everything we've been taught. But today, we're going to talk about a massive mistake that almost every single ice angler makes. We're talking about confusing any deep spot with a true winter bream sanctuary. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to tell the difference. You'll understand why you've been blanking on those perfect spots, and you'll stop wasting hours shivering over barren water. The secret isn't in the depth itself, but in something most people completely miss on their fish finders, even when it's staring them right in the face. So I have to ask, do you automatically drill over the deepest spot you find? Let me know in the comments and be honest. It's time to get into the truth. For generations, the wisdom has been simple. When the ice comes, the fish go deep. It makes sense on the surface. Deeper water is more stable, it's less affected by the brutal cold topside, and it feels like a safe haven. This idea has been passed down from father to son, from one fishing buddy to another. We see a deep basin on a map or a big number on our sonar, and our brains light up. We think, that's the one, that's where the whole school is hiding. And modern technology, like our fancy sonars and GPS mapping, has only made it easier to fall into this trap. We can pinpoint the deepest point to the exact foot, so we march out there, full of confidence, drill our holes, and we wait, and wait, and wait. The problem is we've focused so much on one single factor, depth, that we've forgotten what a fish, especially a bream, actually needs to survive the long winter. First, let's break down the anatomy of a trap hole. Picture this. You're looking at your lake map and you see it, a big 50-foot basin in the middle of a lake that averages 20 feet. It looks like the perfect refuge. It's the obvious spot. But what is often happening at the very bottom of these deep, bowl-shaped holes? In many lakes, especially fertile ones, the summer and fall decomposition of weeds and algae consumes a huge amount of oxygen in the deepest, most stagnant water. This creates an anoxic, or low oxygen zone. A bream is not going to sit for months in a place where it can barely breathe. So while the temperature might be stable, the water quality itself can be hostile. It looks like a safe house from the outside, but inside, the air is toxic. That deep reading on your sonar doesn't tell you about the oxygen levels, and that's the first clue you're being deceived. The next issue with these classic trap holes is the bottom composition. Think about the shape of a deep, symmetrical basin. It's often like a big, smooth bowl. Over the years, silt and fine mud have washed down and settled there, creating a bottom that is soft, mucky, and completely featureless. What does a bream eat in the winter? It forages for small invertebrates, bloodworms, and other life in the substrate. A soft, barren, muddy bottom offers very little food. It's the equivalent of a food desert. Bream are efficient and they want to expend the least amount of energy possible. They need to be near a food source even if they are feeding infrequently. A sterile, mucky bottom is not a pantry, so when you drop your camera down and see nothing but a smooth, dark wasteland, it's not because the fish are hiding, it's because there's simply nothing there for them to eat or relate to. It's a dead zone. So we've established that a bream needs two critical things: enough oxygen to live comfortably and access to a food source. But there's a third element that's just as important: structure or cover. It doesn't have to be a giant rock pile or a submerged forest. In winter, structure can be much more subtle. A bream school sitting in a wide-open basin is vulnerable. They feel exposed. They prefer to tuck up against something. This something provides a sense of security and a reference point. In a featureless bowl, there are no reference points. It's like being in the middle of an empty parking lot, The fish won't feel secure enough to settle there for a long period. They might pass through, but they won't set up camp. This is why a slightly shallower spot with some feature is almost always better than a deeper spot with none. Now let's shift our thinking. Instead of asking where is the deepest water, we need to start asking where is the best winter habitat. A bream's metabolism slows way down in the cold. It's not aggressively hunting, it's conserving energy. So its ideal home is a place that meets all its needs in one small area. It needs a safe place to rest with good water quality that is directly adjacent to a place where it can easily find a snack. The fish doesn't want to commute 100 yards to get a meal. It wants to roll out of bed and have the refrigerator right there. This concept of a wintering neighborhood is the key. You're not looking for a single spot. You're looking for an area with the right combination of features. The depth is only one part of that equation, and often it's not even the most important part. So, what does this perfect neighborhood actually look like on a map or on your sonar? This is where the game changes. Forget the big, obvious basins for a moment. Start looking for irregularities. The most productive winter bream locations are often old river or creek channels that wind their way through the lake bottom. These channels are fantastic because they offer multiple features in one place. They have a deeper trough which provides that stable water temperature. But more importantly, they have channel edges. These edges create a sharp, vertical drop-off. A bream can sit in the deeper part of the channel and with just a small flick of its tail, move up onto the edge or the adjacent flat to feed. It's the perfect combination of safety and access to food. The edges of these old channels are where the magic happens. Think about it. The edge provides a current break and a distinct structural element for fish to relate to. It's a wall they can sit next to. Furthermore, the bottom composition is often different. The edge might be harder, composed of gravel or sand, because any slight current has kept the soft muck from settling there. This harder bottom is exactly where those invertebrates and other food sources live, so the bream have a safe, deep trough to rest in and a food-rich, hard-bottomed ledge right next door. It's a full-service resort for winter fish. This is the kind of spot that will hold a massive school of bream all winter long, while that 50-foot basin a quarter-mile away remains completely empty. Let's talk about how to spot this on your electronics. It's about reading the signals beyond the big depth number. When you're over a potential spot, pay close attention to the bottom return on your flasher or graph. A classic trap hole will often show a thin, weak bottom line. This indicates a soft, silty bottom that's absorbing the sonar signal. A prime wintering spot, like a channel edge or a hard bottom flat, will show a thick, bright, and strong bottom return. That's your sonar screaming at you, yeah, this is a hard bottom. That's where the food is. Sometimes you'll even see a double echo, which is another great sign of a hard bottom. Learning to differentiate between a soft and hard bottom on your specific unit is one of the most valuable skills you can develop for ice fishing. Another subtle clue is looking for fuzz. When you find a hard bottom area near a drop-off, look closely at the bottom signal. Are you seeing any small marks or a slight fuzz sitting right on the bottom? Many times, a huge school of inactive bream won't show up as distinct, big arches like they do in the summer. They will be packed tightly together, fins tucked, barely moving. On sonar, this can look like a slightly thicker bottom line or a low-lying cloud of static. Most anglers would pass right over this thinking it's interference or weeds, but the experienced angler knows. They see that fuzz on a hard bottom next to deep water, and they know they've hit the jackpot. That's not noise, that's the entire community of fish you've been looking for all day. Let me paint you a picture of a typical failed trip. I remember a day on a new lake. I studied the map and found it the perfect spot. A 60-foot hole, the deepest point for miles. I was so sure. I got there early, drilled 10 holes in a grid pattern over the entire basin. I spent the next 6 hours moving from hole to hole, trying different depths, different jigs, different baits. Nothing. Not a single mark on the flasher, not a single bite. The camera showed me exactly what I described earlier. A flat, boring, muddy bottom. It was a biological desert. I was fishing based on a theory, a deeper is better myth, and the reality was there was absolutely nothing there for a fish to live on. It was a wasted day, but a valuable lesson. Now let's compare that to a successful trip from last season. I was on a familiar lake, but I decided to ignore the big community holes. I looked at my map and found an old creek channel that made a sharp bend. The channel itself was only about 30 feet deep, while the surrounding flat was 20. It wasn't a dramatic depth change, but on that outside bend, the current had scoured out a small section of gravel bottom right on the lip of the drop. My sonar showed a thick, bright red line indicating that hard bottom, and just below it in the channel I saw that telltale fuzz. It wasn't impressive. It didn't look like a video game screen full of fish, but I knew what it was. I drilled 1 hole, dropped my jig, and it didn't even make it to the bottom. It was one of the best bream days I've ever had. The key difference between those 2 days was not the depth. The successful spot was 30 feet shallower than the failed one. The difference was the combination of features. The second spot had a hard bottom for feeding, a sharp edge for structure, and a deep trough for security. It was a complete habitat. The first spot was just a hole. It had only one feature, depth. And that is simply not enough. We have to train ourselves to look for these combinations. Look for places where different types of structure and bottom content come together. The intersection of a creek channel and a long point, a hard bottom saddle between 2 islands. These are the high percentage areas. They are more complex and harder to find, but they are infinitely more productive. Another type of spot to look for is a subtle inside turn. While the outside bend of a river channel is a classic spot, don't overlook the inside turn. On the inside of a channel bend, the current slows down. This allows softer sediment and organic matter to settle. This might seem bad, but this soft bottom area can be a magnet for bloodworms and other larvae. So you can have a situation where the bream rest on the harder bottom of the main channel or its edge, and then slide over to the soft-bottomed inside turn for a quick meal. The key is proximity. The feeding zone and the resting zone are right next to each other. They don't have to travel, so when you find a channel, don't just fish the deepest part. Explore the entire feature from the steep outside edge to the soft-bottomed inside corner. Don't get completely fixated on river channels either. The same principles apply to other types of structure. A sunken hump or reef that tops out at, say, 25 feet and is surrounded by 35 feet of water can be a prime location. But again, not all humps are created equal. You're looking for the one with a hard-topped surface, maybe some scattered rock or gravel. A hump that's just a soft mud pile won't be nearly as good, and ideally, you want that hump to have a very sharp, steep breaking edge on one side. That steep edge is where the fish will often position themselves, using it for security while they watch the top of the hump for feeding opportunities. They can move up and down that water column with minimal effort. Let's think about the fish's perspective. For a bream in winter, life is about risk versus reward. Every movement costs energy, and energy is precious when food is scarce and your metabolism is slow. So they aren't going to swim 50 yards across a barren flat to check out a potential meal. They're going to position themselves in a place that offers maximum security and the highest probability of a meal appearing right in front of them with the least amount of effort. That's why these sharp breaks and edges are so crucial. They are ambush points and safety zones rolled into one. The fish can just sit there, suspended and neutral, waiting. This is the behavior we need to capitalize on, and it doesn't happen in the bottom of a featureless basin. How do you start putting this into practice? It begins at home, before you even get to the lake. Get a good contour map of your lake, whether it's on paper or a digital app. Stop looking for the biggest, deepest hole. Instead, trace the lines of any old creek or river channels. Mark every sharp bend, every intersection where a tributary channel meets the main one. Look for sunken humps and long, tapering underwater points that drop into deep water. Highlight the areas with the tightest contour lines, as this indicates the steepest breaks. You should be building a list of 10 to 15 potential habitats, not just deep spots. Your whole mindset needs to shift from hunting for a number to hunting for a specific type of underwater topography. When you get on the ice, your approach needs to be more surgical. Instead of drilling a wide grid over a huge basin, you're now focused on a much smaller specific area, like the bend in a creek channel. Drill your holes to dissect the feature. Drill a hole on top of the flat, one on the lip of the edge, one on the steep slope, and one in the bottom of the channel. This allows you to quickly check all the different components of the habitat. Fish each hole for 10 to 15 minutes. Pay close attention with your sonar. Are you marking anything? Is the bottom hard or soft? By doing this, you're not just randomly searching for fish. You're gathering data and figuring out exactly how the fish are relating to that specific piece of structure on that particular day. Remember that fish can move. Even in a wintering area, they might shift slightly depending on the day. On a bright, sunny, high-pressure day, they might move up onto the top edge of the break to feed. During a cold front or on a low-light, nasty day, they might tuck down into the deepest part of the trough and become less active. Your job, by drilling a few strategic holes, is to find where they are positioned in their neighborhood right now. It's much easier to find them when you already know you're in the right neighborhood. It's the difference between searching for a person in the right city versus searching for them in the right country. You've already narrowed the search area by 90% before you even wet a line. Consider the presence of other fish too. A good bream wintering spot is often a good spot for other species as well. You might find perch or crappies using the same structure. And more importantly, you might find predators like pike or walleye nearby. Predators know where the food is. If you're fishing a spot and you happen to catch a walleye, that's a huge clue. That walleye isn't there by accident. It's there because there's a reliable food source nearby. The presence of predators confirms that you're in a productive, living part of the lake, not a sterile, dead zone. It's another piece of the puzzle that tells you you've found a true wintering habitat, not just a random hole in the ground. Think about the transition period in late fall, just before the lake freezes. Bream don't just magically appear in their wintering holes the day the ice forms, they migrate. They often follow these same creek channels and break lines from their late fall feeding areas into these deeper, more stable wintering zones. Understanding these migration routes can be another powerful tool. If you know where the fish were in October, you can often predict where they'll be in January by following the most logical underwater highway, the channel, to the first suitable-looking winter habitat. It's all connected. The lake is a dynamic system, and the more you understand how fish use it throughout the year, the better you'll be at pinpointing them when they are concentrated under the ice. So, to put it all together, the next time you're on the ice, I want you to challenge yourself. Find the deepest hole in the lake and deliberately ignore it. Instead, find a piece of structure, a channel bend, a steep breaking hump, or an underwater point. In a medium depth range, it should be deeper than the surrounding flats, but not necessarily the absolute deepest water. Analyze it with your sonar. Look for the hard bottom. Look for the steep break. Look for that subtle fuzz on the screen. Drill your holes strategically to cover the feature. I am willing to bet that you will find more fish on that piece of mediocre structure than you ever will in that perfect, beautiful, and completely empty 50-foot hole. It's time to stop fishing memories and myths and start fishing the reality of what a bream needs to survive. So let's wrap this up. For years, we've been chasing a number on a screen. We've been told, go deep, and we've followed that advice blindly. The biggest and most crucial takeaway today is this: stop chasing depth and start hunting for habitat. A deep hole is just geography. A wintering spot is a complete ecosystem in miniature. It's a home. It has safety, which is the depth and the structure. And it has a kitchen, which is the hard bottom with its food source. The fish aren't in the deepest hole, they're in the best house on the block. And that house isn't always the biggest or in the deepest part of town. This single shift in mindset can and will completely change your results on the ice. You'll spend less time drilling and more time catching. You'll go out with a plan, a strategy based on fish biology, not on old fishermen's tales. Thank you so much for watching. If this video made you rethink your strategy, do me a favor and hit that like button. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next one. Now, I have a final question for you, and I want you to share your knowledge. What's the most overlooked feature you have found that consistently holds winter fish? Share your secrets in the comments below.